people, preview of the Newcastle game, score, draw written all over it for me. Just looking at Newcastle's fixtures, I'm just looking here when the last time Newcastle failed to score. And I'm going back, and it's quite mad. I mean, including the Champions League. I'm going back here into February, Newcastle are still scoring in each game. Newcastle haven't failed to score since the 25th of January. I'm going to make a note of that for when I go on the pod later. I will be on the lineup show with Rashid and everybody and all those legends at 4 p.m. today, so make sure you tune in to Rashid's channel, Level-Headed Arsenal Fan, on YouTube for that. Lots of great chat and previews and knowledge being dropped by a bunch of legends there. But yes, in terms of new knowledge that people might not be thinking about, I just want to double check this because that's crazy. Am I right? Newcastle 0, Aston Villa 2. That was on the 25th of January. Subsequent to that, Newcastle have scored in every single game. That's interesting, man. Because we've been conceding in every single game. When was the last time we kept a clean sheet? When was the last time Arsenal kept a clean sheet? So Newcastle have scored in every game since the 25th of January. We haven't kept a clean sheet. I guess, it's the sporting game, but we're talking domestically here. And that isn't to fit an agenda, that's just we're talking about the Premier League. This is a Premier League preview. So let's have a look here. When was the last time we kept a clean sheet in the Premier League? Let's go back here. So we're back. Okay, so the 4th of March was the last time we kept a clean sheet in the Premier League. So like I was saying, this is score draw written all over it. And the reason it's a draw for me is just because you got two teams who are out of form, who are struggling to get wins. Maybe not struggling to score, because we score in the Premier League, but we don't score enough. That's the problem. And 1-1 just seems to be, if I was still a betting guy and I had a bit of dough to put on, 1-1 would be a nice one, I think, for me. Or at least just a score draw of some kind. Draw, both teams to score, that kind of thing. Newcastle obviously without a lot of players. They're basically without a midfield. So are we. We may well be starting our midfield. Zubimendi, Rice, Odegaard. But that midfield is crocked. That midfield can't do more than half an hour. We need to ensure that we do enough in that half an hour, or even 20 minutes, whatever it is, because you just don't know this team anymore. We need to do enough in that time to see the game out for the rest of the 60 minutes. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be pessimistic for the sake of it. We could come away with a 2-1, but I don't see... Those are the only two possible scorelines I see, so I'm hopeful of the 2-1. But I really do feel it's going to be 1-1. I think the way that our midfield has been disjointed, tired, uncreative, whether that's with or without Odegaard, is going to be a big problem going into this, not just this game and the last few games of the season. Football oftentimes is won in midfield. It's the midfield battle that really allows you to take a stranglehold of the game. It allows you to organise your defence. It allows you to break forward with cohesion. We don't have that now. My phone's ringing. Sorry, 1 second. 1 second. Hello?
Hi, I'm calling from Pay for Delivery.
Yep.
I will be there in 30 minutes.
20. Alright, that's great. I'm here. That's fine.
Thank you.
Cheers then. Bye. Sorry about that. I didn't know where the mute button is in OBS. So, fuck it. We're going to keep rolling. So, very professionally done. Where was I? Yeah, midfield battle. I worry about that midfield battle because I'm getting a new sofa. Worried about that midfield battle because we've been losing a lot of them recently. And despite the fact that Newcastle have nobody in there, I think only Tonali will be in there. Maybe Willock will be playing as well. I wonder what the predicted lineup is actually. What is the predicted lineup? Because I haven't kept track of all of Newcastle's injuries. Let's have a look here. Livramento, Gordon, Shah, Joe Linton booked and suspended. So you're potentially looking at so do you know what? We're potentially looking at a midfield trio of Ramsey, Tonali and Bruno. Bruno's back. That's a big one, actually. I didn't realise Bruno was back. I thought he was injured. Anyway, he's back. So regardless, LiveScore seems to think that Bukayo Saka is going to be injured and not in the team. But we all know what this manager is like, don't we? If you can breathe, you will play under Mikel Arteta. And he will hoodwink you into it. He will gaslight you into it like he did with Yuri and Timber before PSG. And he said to him, despite the fact that Timber had been told by the Dutch medical staff that he needed an operation, Arteta told Timber that he needed him more and made him play on. And this guy, Timber, has so much talent. He's, if not a world-class, if not one of our few world-class players, he's one of the closest to world-class, along with Saliba, Gabriel. And he's being ruined. He's just another one who's being ruined. I mean, Arteta's ruined. If he has successfully ruined Timber, which it looks like he has, that would mean he's ruined our two best right backs at the club for years. So well done to Arteta for that. So you're looking at a potential starting lineup of Harvey Barnes, Osula, Ilanga, Ramsey, Tonali, Guimaraes, Lewis Hall, Botman, Thiaw, Trippier. Ramsdale in goal. Interesting, forgot about that. This is not straightforward. This is not as straightforward as people seem to think it is. People seem to think this is some sort of ideal game for us. This Newcastle team, whilst we have had a couple of 4-1s and big wins against them at home, we've had quite a lot of draws. And of course, we all know what happened in the Carabao Cup last season. Eddie Howe seems to have the know-how to get one over on Mikel. And I'm worried about this game being a draw. I really am. I'm looking at that and thinking, now I'm thinking a bit more about their midfield, and like I was saying about winning midfield battles, Bruno and Tonali in there, that's enough for them to cause us problems, especially when we have tired legs, especially when we have low confidence. As much as we want to talk our talk in the press conferences and in interviews and give sound bites and quotes that are spread around Twitter and all that, seriously, this team is psychologically bereft. This team is struggling psychologically. I bet that in some sense, as strange as it may seem, they just want the season to end. They want the season to end with a Premier League title, but I feel that it's just been traumatic for them, and they've got another 5 games of trauma to come. So, if you're looking at a midfield for us of Odegaard, Zubimendi and Declan Rice, going up against Ramsey, Tonali and Guimaraes, how confident are you? How really confident are you? We've seen in the Man City game, Rice oftentimes ahead of Eze and Odegaard. Yes, he might stick in. Well, do you know what? I was going to say he might stick in Eze over Odegaard, but that's not going to happen, is it? Let's just forget that idea. Odegaard played 90 minutes against Man City. Why am I even thinking he might? I'm brain dead, obviously, to think that Eze might come in for Odegaard. Forget I was going to say that. The way that midfield played against City, the way it was all lopsided, the way it lacked cohesion, how can you be confident that even this mishmash of a Newcastle team can't come in, can't play around us, can't keep turning Zubimendi, can't, think about Tonali and Bruno pressuring Zubimendi. Think about how Tonali can, cope with any sort of attacking threat that Odegaard has. Are you that confident that the likes of Odegaard and Zubimendi will be up for that challenge? I'm not. I'm not trying to be unnecessarily pessimistic. I'm just saying what I see. Catchphrase settings, Roy Walker. Say what you see. And this is what I'm seeing. So, if we win, even if we draw, we're back at the top of the table. So that's good. However, it can't be a draw. We cannot draw this game. This is the more winnable, as well as Burnley. I think this is the most winnable game of our last 5 games. because if you look at, I think Fulham will struggle against. I think because Fulham, what's the table saying? Do Fulham still have a chance? It's very tight up there. Fulham still have a vague chance. Let's say Fulham win this weekend and then we draw or whatever. It doesn't matter what we do for Fulham. But let's say Fulham win this weekend. They'll be up to 48 points. That will leave them 1 point behind the Europa League places, potentially, if results go their way. So they're still in with a shout of Europe. Newcastle aren't. However, that could also work against us because they could be playing with more freedom when teams, you oftentimes see when teams are relegated already and they come into a game and it's like they play with much more freedom. They give a much better game. They sometimes nick draws that you might not expect them to. They're like 7-1 to win, and they might get a win when they're not expected to because they're playing with more freedom. The pressure's off because they've already been relegated. And we often see that. We often hear those comments like, oh, why couldn't you play like this before? Well, the reason is because there's no pressure. Conversely, on us, there's huge pressure. And I see people online saying things like, oh, well, all the pressure's on Man City, all the pressure's off us. What the fuck are you talking about? There is the most gigantic amount of pressure that there's ever been on this Arsenal team right now at this moment. And that's what worries me. Because we don't deal well with pressure anyway, let alone the largest amount of pressure that this club has been on since last year. But in a very long time, this is the largest amount of pressure that a manager and set of players have been on at Arsenal, just because of the cumulative effect of second. So this is potentially a very problematic game today. But every game is problematic, and previews are going to run in a very similar vein because we haven't done our job earlier in the season and we have piled all this pressure on ourselves. This is only ourselves to blame. If we'd have only beaten Bournemouth and we'd have only hung on against relegated Wolves, who were basically relegated at the time, let's face it. If only we'd have held on. If only we'd have held on to our win at the Molineux, and if only we'd have beaten Bournemouth, none of this would be a problem. We would be sitting pretty, we would be sitting back, we would be relaxed, we would be calm, we would be cool. But no, Arteta had to do Arteta things. And yet people still want to go through this again next year. Why? Why, people? Why do you want to do that? And I'll leave it there. 1-1, my prediction. 2-1, my hope. Come on, Arsenal.